Let's talk about the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. Back in 1944, this ambitious study set out to systematically define the physical and psychological effects of human starvation. The original goal was to use the results to help famine victims at the end of World War II. Lack of food was a devastating crisis in many countries, but the findings have extended beyond that, helping to broaden our understanding of both weight loss and weight gain. My name is Jeremy Colon, and this is The Dark Side of Fitness, episode 18. How the study worked. The researchers recruited conscientious objectors of World War II and carefully screened over 400 applicants to finally wind up with 36 men. Here's a recruitment poster for the study from 1944 above. The study was split into 3 parts. Part 1, 12 weeks of normal living and eating. During this time, volunteers ate an average of just over 3,000 calories per day. These were young, lean, active men, so that amount kept their body weight stable. This phase was included in order to have controlled data. In other words, this helped the scientists measure the men's physical and mental health under normal conditions. Part 2, 24 weeks of semi-starvation. This was designed to create a 25% body weight loss. So for a 170-pound man, that'd be a 43-pound weight loss, taking him down to a body weight of 127. On average, total energy intake was just over 1,500 calories per day. If that doesn't sound all that low, remember that it's half the energy the volunteers needed to maintain their weight. They were also instructed to continue their regular physical activity patterns, which included 22 miles, about 35.4 kilometers of walking each week. The men ate a diet similar to what people in Europe were likely eating, which was about 2 meals per day that were rich in carbohydrates and low in protein. Small amounts of macaroni, potatoes, and cabbage were typically on the menu. Part 3, 12 weeks of restricted refeeding followed by 8 weeks of unrestricted refeeding. Okay, you're probably wondering what? Okay, let's break this down. The scientists divided the men into 4 groups and increased their daily intake by Group 1, plus 400 calories. Group 2, plus 800 calories. Group 3, plus 1,200 calories. Group 4, plus 1,600 calories. So Group 1 was now consuming about 1,900 calories. Group 2 got about 2,300 calories, and so on. They also gave the men vitamin and protein supplements as well. After the 12 weeks, the volunteers were allowed to eat as much as they wanted, and as expected, it ended up being a lot. Here's a look at the results. Physical and physiological changes. During Part 1, semi-starvation, the men dropped to approximately 30% of their controlled body fat and had an over 20% decrease in their strength. Their heart rate slowed down from an already low average of about 55 beats per minute (BPM) to about 35 beats per minute. This was a sign that their metabolism was slowing in order to decrease the amount of energy they burned at rest. It's thought that this is an evolutionary survival mechanism. The men's bodies were conserving energy so that they could survive a famine longer. Other indicators of this calorie defense were decreased blood volume, shrinking heart size, shrinking blood vessels, including in their eyes, which gave them more of a porcelain-like glistening. Their hair follicles began to harden, and they lost some hair. The men also noticed that they were getting less coordinated, were more sore, and became less comfortable sitting down. Plus, they got colder more easily, in part due to decrease in metabolism and body fat. Psychological and behavioral changes. We all felt a little cranky if we haven't eaten for a little bit. Now imagine having that feeling for most of the day over 24 weeks. Unsurprisingly, the men in the study complained of feeling old and constantly tired, had decreased sex drive, and increased interest in food, reportedly looking at cookbooks and pictures of food obsessively, were irritable, especially if they had to wait too long for food or wasn't served on time, aka just being hangry. A few more surprising and super interesting outcomes. The men were giving ad libitum coffee and gum, and as a result would chew up to 40 packs a day and drink up to 15 cups of coffee. Depression ratings were the highest by the end of the caloric restriction and lowest at the end of the refeeding. The men didn't perceive themselves as too skinny, but instead thought that the other people looked more fat, which is a characteristic shown by those with anorexia. Only a few weeks into the experiment, one patient reportedly kept having cannibalistic dreams and would cheat on trips into town, sneaking milkshakes and sundaes, which was a classic staple for the time. When the lead researcher confronted him, the man broke down crying, but then began to threaten the researcher and threatened to take his own life. He was removed from the study and placed in a university psychiatric ward. What happened when the men started eating again? Even the Hannibal Lecter patient was seemingly okay after having a normal diet for a few days and was released shortly after. During the first few weeks of unrestricted refeeding, participants ate up to an estimated 11,000 calories per day. Some of the men ended up vomiting because they ate too much too quickly. What happened after the study? A lot of participants reported having abnormal eating patterns for months to years after the study and maintained a higher than normal body weight for quite some time before returning to normal. Some participants maintained a level of food insecurity years after, meaning that they feared food could be taken away from them. This may have contributed to abnormal eating patterns. In 1997, researchers at the University of Switzerland reanalyzed the data and found that the volunteers' body fat returned to 100% of pre-starvation levels faster than their fat-free mass did. In other words, they gained all of their fat back, but not all of their muscle. That caused a problem. During the time their fat-free mass was lower than pre-starvation levels, the men continued to naturally overeat. The good news is that once their fat-free mass approached 100%, this drive to overeat ceased. The bad news, however, the lag between the two caused body fat to end up at nearly 180% of pre-starvation level. So they finally gained their muscle back, but ended up with a lot more body fat, and therefore at a higher overall body weight than when they started. For a visual, check out the chart above. Here are some coaching takeaways. Our bodies are programmed to defend us against calorie restriction, and it doesn't require months of extreme food deprivation like what the men in the study experienced. To trigger this response, it can even happen when you're just trying to get a little leaner. Because the reality is, no quick fat loss solution can overcome millions of years of evolution. Number 2, when people lose weight, their metabolic rate decreases. But typically, this reduction is even greater than what you expect from the change in body mass alone. Your body requires fewer calories to maintain your new weight than someone who's been at the same weight most of their adult life. This is known as metabolic adaptation, and it's one reason it's so hard for people to stay in weight loss. Here's another reason. Number 3, when people regain lost weight, there's a good chance they'll end up with more body fat and less muscle than they had originally. This is frustrating, but from a biological standpoint, it makes sense. Fat provides more energy per gram muscle. So to protect you against future famine, your body may prioritize fat recovery over that muscle. Plus, it takes a lot less energy for your body to maintain body fat than it does muscle. Number 4, highly restrictive diets can affect mental and emotional health. This aspect of weight loss programs often get overlooked. Thanks to biology, your brain will try to tell your body that not having food really sucks. The result? You may feel moody and angry on top of feeling hungry. Sure, the Minnesota Starvation Experiment provided an extreme example of this, but remember, just about everything's on a continuum. Dieting can increase feelings of anxiety, depression, resentment, and irritation. This may not be obvious, but it's something you can look out for within yourself and the behaviors and actions that follow. What's more, a highly restrictive approach can also backfire when it comes time to ending the diet. Because our brains are wired to see food as rewarding and pleasurable, we may overcompensate once we're off the diet and start eating more than ever.
Yes, all of this is a bit of a downer, but it doesn't mean that losing weight is impossible or that weight regain isn't inevitable. It just means we need to account for these challenges. One way to do that, recognize that. Number 5, muscle plays an important role in determining how much energy we consume and burn. As you can see from this study, the men didn't get back to eating normally until their fat-free mass was equivalent to what it was before weight loss. You can use this information to help better inform you about your approach to getting leaner. The upshot is it's best to preserve as much muscle as possible. Resisting training and getting enough protein can be powerful strategies here, and aim for a more modest progress over time instead of fast results that require extreme calorie restrictions. More protein and regular resistance training are also key to helping avoid fat regain when you start eating more again. It's not the sexiest approach, but it's ultimately more effective, sustainable, and enjoyable, which actually sounds pretty cool. But also remember, which goes to number 6, successfully losing weight isn't just about how fast the number on the scale drops. The quality of that weight loss, for example, how much of that lost weight is fat versus muscle, really matters. But it's also about the quality of your life. The emotional, mental, and relational tolls that extreme dieting take on people are significant. So it's best to almost take a deep health lens, which includes discussing all the options and potential outcomes that are good for you, so that way you can better understand the trade-offs of dieting before you start, and as a result, having a clear idea of what you really want to do. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and view this video. If you like more content like this, please like, subscribe, and honestly share with anybody who could benefit from this. So, my last thoughts on all this, and I think it's the most important thing to take away from this, is understanding trade-offs. And the reason why I say that is, like, trade-offs are so important to always keep in the back of your mind when you do anything, but it's particularly important when you are putting your body through a shock by doing a diet, going for a weight loss program, or just do anything that is going to alter your life in general. And I think we are just so quick to just have a very narrow-minded vision of just, okay, I just want to lose weight, I want to drop the weight, whatever it takes, that's it. But understanding that doing all that also has its effects, and it has to be more of a feedback loop, that if I do this, I'm going to get this outcome. If I do that, I'm going to get this outcome. And we have to remind ourselves that part of bettering ourselves, right, and we're changing we're not only just doing a mental shift, but we're also doing a physiological shift. So when we're cutting weight, that's going to affect everything we do, because we're not used to it. So we are going to get hungry, we're going to get irritable, we're going to we're going to be in a mood per se, right? So anything you do, always understand what the trade-off is. So if I'm going to lose 20 pounds, what does that look like? Week in, week out, day in, day out, month in, month out. And how does that affect everything else that I'm doing? How does that affect my performance? How does that affect my social aspect? How does that affect my personal relationships? How does that affect everything that I do from the moment that I wake up to the moment I sleep, right? Like, obviously, things are never going to be a very linear path. It's going to be up and down. But let it be up and down with you knowing what to expect. Let it be up and down, you in control of your car, which is your body, versus you kind of spiraling down and not knowing what's going to happen, or things happen and you pretty much act like the Hannibal Lecter guy who, after like a couple of days, just lost himself. So I say all this, that whatever you do, take your time, right? Don't rush the process. Don't rush yourself into trying to better yourself. Take the time you need. Figure out what works, what doesn't work. The first
couple weeks, the first month, really, the first 4 to 6 weeks of just fat loss or weight loss is figuring out what's gonna work for you. So write things down, try different things. Do not marry to a certain way of doing things, right? Nothing's absolute. What's absolute is you being consistent and you giving it your all. So until then, take your time, see how things go, flush things out, trade-offs, take things out, do things, add more to what already works, take away things that don't, and just get better each and every day. So again, thank you so much for watching this video. Have a great day. Take care.